Emily Carter's perfect life shattered in a single morning when neighbors found her two young children alone in their locked apartment, and the smiling mother everyone admired was nowhere to be found. Emily Carter looked like the kind of mother people admired from a distance. She lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the edge of Brookhaven, a quiet town where everyone seemed to know each other. From the outside, her life appeared peaceful and organized. Each morning, neighbors saw her hustling her two children, 7-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Max, into the car for school, her hair neatly tied back, a reusable coffee cup in her hand. On weekends, she posted cheerful photos to social media, Lily holding up an art project with a wide grin, Max chasing their golden retriever in the yard, Emily smiling with a glow that suggested everything was perfectly under control. People scrolled through her feed and thought of her as the woman who had figured it all out, a single mom who managed to stay upbeat and put together. What no one saw were the nights when Emily sat at the kitchen table long after the children were asleep, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. The cheerful photos were carefully timed snapshots, moments of brightness in a life slowly being swallowed by shadows. After her divorce 2 years earlier, she worked double shifts at a grocery store and cleaned offices late at night to keep the apartment. The long hours barely covered rent and utilities. Groceries often came from the discount bin, and she sometimes skipped meals so the kids would have enough. She smiled for the neighbors and waved when they passed, but inside she carried a weight that grew heavier with each passing week. Emily's debt was a quiet storm. Medical bills from Max's childhood asthma treatments, credit cards maxed out during the divorce, and late fees from loans she had taken to stay afloat piled up faster than she could pay them. Every month she made frantic calculations, juggling which bill could be postponed without triggering a shut-off notice. The phone calls from collectors became relentless, their voices polite at first, then sharp, then threatening. Emily began keeping her phone on silent, afraid of what each new ring might bring. At work, she forced a friendly smile while bagging groceries or scrubbing office floors, but in her mind, numbers and deadlines swirled like a constant storm. The loneliness deepened the cracks. Her parents lived several states away and rarely called. Friends from before the divorce had drifted off, busy with their own families. The few times someone offered help, Emily brushed it away with a practiced "we're fine," terrified that admitting the truth would bring judgment or, worse, intervention. Her children were the only light in her world. Every night she kissed their foreheads and promised silently that she would keep them safe, even as she wondered how much longer she could keep that promise. The pressure built slowly, like a quiet leak behind a wall. To outsiders, Emily remained the smiling mom with perfect photos and an endless supply of energy. Inside, she was unraveling, each bill she couldn't pay, each night spent staring at the ceiling, each small disappointment added another layer of fear. By the time November rolled around, Emily was balancing on the thinnest edge between holding it together and letting it all collapse. The cold Thursday morning began like any other in Brookhaven, but inside Emily Carter's small apartment, a quiet tension filled the air. The landlord, a middle-aged man named Harold who rarely knocked unless absolutely necessary, had come to check a reported water leak in the hallway. He expected nothing more than a routine maintenance call. Instead, when his key turned in the lock after repeated unanswered knocks, he stepped into a scene that would haunt him for weeks. The living room lights were dim, the air chilly, and two small children sat curled together on the couch. 7-year-old Lily clutched a threadbare blanket, her wide eyes fixed on the doorway. 5-year-old Max held an empty cereal box in his lap, shaking it for crumbs. Their mother was nowhere in sight. The children were frightened but unharmed. They wore pajamas despite the late morning hour, and their small faces were streaked with dried tears. When Harold asked where their mother was, Lily only shrugged, her voice trembling as she said she didn't know. There was no note, no sign of a quick trip to the store, no explanation at all. The refrigerator held a few scattered items, half a gallon of milk, a container of leftovers, a nearly empty loaf of bread. The apartment was tidy but eerily silent, as if someone had left in a hurry but still locked the door behind them. Alarmed, Harold dialed the local police, his voice breaking as he explained what he had found. Officers arrived within minutes, their radios crackling in the crisp autumn air. They gently coaxed the children into warm coats and led them outside to a waiting patrol car. The scene inside the apartment grew more unsettling as they searched for clues. Emily's purse was gone, along with her car keys. Her cell phone charger sat neatly on the kitchen counter, but the phone itself was missing. No signs of forced entry were visible. The front door was locked from the inside, the windows latched tight. It was as if Emily had simply vanished. As word spread through the small complex, neighbors gathered in doorways and whispered in worried tones. Some speculated that she might have been abducted. Others wondered if she had suffered an accident on the way to work. A few exchanged uneasy glances, remembering the late-night sounds of muffled crying they sometimes heard through the walls. The absence of any struggle made the mystery even more chilling. Detectives began canvassing the area, questioning residents and pulling security footage from nearby streets. The children were taken to a safe location while social workers tried to comfort them, but even the professionals struggled to understand what had happened. Ours turned into the longest day Brookhaven had seen in years. Each unanswered question fed the growing unease. Why would a devoted mother leave her children alone with no explanation? Was she in danger, or had she chosen to disappear? As evening settled and the first television crews arrived, the quiet apartment became the center of a puzzle that no one yet knew how to solve. Detectives wasted no time digging into every part of Emily Carter's life. With her car missing and her phone switched off, they began tracing the digital trail she might have left behind. At first, the search seemed hopeless. Days passed with no sign of movement on her social media accounts, no calls to family members, and no activity on her main bank card. Then, a break came from an unexpected place. A security camera from a 24-hour gas station on the edge of town captured Emily's gray sedan rolling through at 3 o'clock in the morning, just hours before her children were discovered alone. The grainy footage showed her at the pump, hood pulled over her head, glancing around as if making sure no one recognized her. She bought gas, a bottle of water, and a prepaid phone before driving off toward the highway. Investigators turned their attention to her finances and uncovered a troubling pattern. In the week leading up to her disappearance, Emily had withdrawn nearly every dollar from her checking account in a series of small, careful transactions, as though she wanted to avoid drawing attention. The final withdrawal occurred at an ATM near the bus station shortly after midnight. Detectives also found evidence that she had purchased a bus ticket online under the name Claire Daniels, a name with no ties to her or her family. The ticket was for a route that stretched hundreds of miles, with a departure scheduled just a few hours after she was last seen. It was clear that Emily had not been taken against her will. She had planned this. The discovery shifted the investigation from a possible kidnapping to a case of deliberate abandonment. Detectives sifted through her apartment again, looking for anything that might explain why a loving mother would leave two small children behind. Inside a drawer, they found a small notebook filled with budget calculations, payment due dates, and desperate notes about rising debts. Scrawled across one page in hurried handwriting were the words "No way out." It became impossible to ignore the growing picture of a woman who had been quietly drowning under financial pressure and fear. Still, the question remained. If she loved her children as much as everyone believed, why leave them without even a goodbye? Public opinion began to shift as these details emerged. The town's initial sympathy for a mother who might have been harmed turned into a wave of anger and disbelief. Social media filled with sharp comments, accusing her of selfishness and cruelty. Some speculated that she might have met someone online and run off to start a new life. Others suggested she had simply broken under the weight of her responsibilities and fled. Meanwhile, investigators followed every lead, tracking the prepaid phone she had purchased and interviewing employees at the bus station. Each clue painted a picture of careful planning, but none revealed where she was headed or why she believed disappearing was her only choice. The deeper they dug, the more haunting the mystery became. Nearly a week after Emily Carter vanished, a weary detective sat scrolling through yet another list of hotel check-ins when a small detail caught his attention. A budget motel 2 states away had logged a guest named Claire Daniels, the same alias used to purchase the bus ticket. The reservation had been paid in cash, but the ID used at the desk was Emily's real driver's license. It was the first solid lead since she disappeared. Within hours, officers from the local jurisdiction were contacted and a quiet operation began before sunrise. They wanted to avoid a public scene, unsure if Emily might panic or try to run again. The motel was a squat, aging building on the outskirts of a truck stop, its faded neon sign flickering against the early morning sky. Police vehicles rolled silently into the nearly empty parking lot as the first light of dawn painted the horizon. Officers moved with careful precision, taking positions outside room 12, the door registered to Claire Daniels. A knock echoed through the hallway, followed by a tense silence. After a long pause, the door opened. Emily stood there, fully dressed, her hair neatly brushed, eyes steady and unreadable. She did not flinch when the officers identified themselves. She simply stepped back and allowed them to enter, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Inside the room, investigators found few belongings. A half-empty duffel bag lay on the bed, packed with clothes and children's photographs. On the small desk sat a disposable cell phone, a bus schedule, and a nearly untouched meal from the motel's vending machine. There were no signs of drugs, alcohol, or any attempt to disguise her appearance. Emily seemed calm, almost detached, as officers explained that she was under arrest for child endangerment. When handcuffs clicked around her wrists, she did not protest or plead. Her expression remained fixed, a faint trace of something between resignation and defiance flickering in her eyes. At the station, she was booked and processed like any other suspect. Cameras captured every step, from fingerprinting to the moment she faced the lens for her mugshot. The resulting image spread across the internet within hours. Emily stared straight ahead, her shoulders squared, a faint half-smile on her lips. The photo became a lightning rod for public debate. Some viewers interpreted the expression as cold indifference, while others saw quiet sorrow or even relief. Comment sections filled with outrage, sympathy, and endless speculation about what had driven her to leave her children behind. Meanwhile, investigators combed through the items she carried, hoping for a note or explanation. The duffel bag yielded nothing but neatly folded clothes and a few toys belonging to Lily and Max. The disposable phone contained no messages or call history, as though she had deliberately kept her world silent. Detectives were left with more questions than answers. They had found Emily, but her reasons remained locked away behind the calm, unreadable face that now stared back from headlines across the country. As prosecutors prepared formal charges, the story of Emily Carter's disappearance seemed clear to the public. News outlets painted her as a mother who coldly walked away from responsibility, leaving her children frightened and alone. Social media was flooded with angry posts demanding harsh punishment. Yet behind the scenes, investigators began uncovering details that complicated the narrative and shifted the case in unexpected ways. While cataloging the belongings recovered from Emily's motel room, an officer noticed a thin manila envelope tucked between folded clothes. Inside were legal documents bearing the name of Emily's estranged aunt, Margaret Hill, a retired nurse living 3 hours away. Among the papers was a notarized letter granting temporary custody of Lily and Max to Margaret in the event of Emily's absence. The letter had been signed and dated just 2 days before Emily disappeared. Detectives immediately contacted Margaret, who confirmed she had spoken with Emily in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. Emily had quietly arranged for her aunt to care for the children if anything happened to her. Margaret explained that Emily feared for the children's safety because of growing threats from aggressive debt collectors tied to high-interest loans she had taken during a medical emergency years earlier. According to Margaret, Emily believed leaving the children under a trusted relative's care would shield them from people she described as dangerous and relentless. Emily had not shared every detail, but she repeatedly expressed fear that staying might put Lily and Max in harm's way. The revelation stunned investigators and softened the tone of the case. Emily was still facing serious charges, but the discovery showed she had not simply abandoned her children in a careless act of selfishness. Instead, she had orchestrated a desperate plan to protect them, even if her methods were misguided and illegal. Financial records supported her claims, threatening messages from untraceable numbers were found on her old phone, and bank statements revealed a pattern of withdrawals consistent with someone trying to stay ahead of relentless creditors. Detectives who once viewed her as heartless began to see a woman cornered by fear and convinced that disappearing was the only way to keep her children safe. When Emily finally appeared in court, the atmosphere was markedly different from the early days of public outrage. Her attorney presented evidence of the custody arrangement, the threatening messages, and her long struggle with crushing debt. Social workers testified that Lily and Max were healthy, well cared for, and living safely with their great aunt. The judge acknowledged the seriousness of leaving the children alone, but also recognized the steps Emily had taken to ensure their protection. Instead of a lengthy prison sentence, she received a reduced charge of child endangerment, probation, and mandatory counseling. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions as Emily walked silently beside her attorney, her expression unreadable. The faint half-smile from her mugshot remained in the public imagination, but those who followed the case closely now understood that behind it was a mother who believed she was making the only choice left to protect the children she loved more than anything else.